at the beginning of Nigeria, those who founded Nigeria, those you call the founding fathers, particularly Awolowo, was painfully aware of the fact that feudalism threatened to overtake the country. And I'll show you. One of the first things that you must note when a feudal state is in flow is that it weaponizes poverty and it weaponizes ignorance. It is not to the advantage of rulers of feudal states to allow the people the knowledge to discern their correct state. It would always seek to make them stupid, either by the use of religion, religious rulers whom they always collaborate with, or home. So you have a situation where Awolowo looked at this and he felt that the antidote will be weaponized knowledge. That is what informed the free education policy in Western Nigeria. If you doubt me, revert to the letter quoted in extensio in an article by Egbola Asisi Olagunju last week. There is a letter, I recalled it after reading it on his page, where Chief Bola Ige and my friend Shola Ogun, who is watching this broadcast, I've seen him a couple of times, will recall there was a letter we received as Form 1 students, 1978-79 session. We had paid school fees before Uncle Bola was sworn in, but we received a full refund of our fees after we had been given books. And then when we were now going to Form 2, we got a letter which reminded us of the need to preserve the textbooks we had used, so that the subsequent year, the students coming behind us would be able to use the same. He then reminded us that the opponents of the UPN were not happy with the idea of a knowledge-based populace, and that this was what the UPN saw as the antidote to feudalism. So as far back as 1978-79, as far back as the 60s, in fact from 1954, when self-government came into the Western region, those who governed in the West understood the need to ensure that the people had sufficient knowledge to be able to resist the forces of feudalism. So there was a concerted effort in the Western region to build educational institutions and to make education universally available, because an educated mind is unamenable to slavery and will not be accepting of second-class membership, because you cannot have second-class citizenship. It's membership of a state. So you have a situation where back in the 1960s, smack bang in the 1970s, there was clarity as to what was required to be done to avoid the feudalization of Nigeria. Witness today, education has become a luxury that cannot be afforded by governments across Western Nigeria. And when they have offered it, how qualitative has it been? But Awolowo sparked other people into action. At this time, the Eastern region, because of the healthy rivalry, followed suit. They too began to offer education, maybe not quite understanding the ideological foundation for it in the Southwest, because it became a commitment of leadership to educate the people. Now, our weaponized knowledge. Nigeria was not always amenable to feudalism. In the eastern part of Nigeria, the one part which had little or nothing to do with monarchies before the coming of the British, where they had to create warrant chiefs, aberration of custom, embraced feudalism by far quicker than any other part. That is what explained the multiple alliances that were found with the feudal north between Azikiwe. But this is not the day to be pointing fingers. Let me now remind you. The Middle Belt, that later became complicit in the erection of feudalism, were one of the first people to resist feudalism because they were the first victims and original victims of feudal empires. They were the slave stock for the slave trading Islamic empires of Kanem Borno and the Sokoto Caliphate. The most important commodity for both were slaves. And the people they refused to Islamize were the persons they could enslave. So by design, these people were not Islamized, but were treated essentially as slave stock. During the planting season, they ensure that when you come out to plant, they will catch you. They had garrisons, places like Cotton Cafe, places like Lafia. Those were Fulani garrisons in the Middle Belt. Those are what became Emirates by the time the British came. The important thing is this: there was a consciousness by the first victims of feudalism to fight feudalism in the new Nigerian state. That is what accounted for the Willings Commission of Inquiry, the fears of the minority, and that was what accounted for the entrenchment of the original Bill of Rights in the 1960 Independence Constitution. You had the TV riots. You had the Jos riot of 1945, caused by British policies of exclusion, where Igbos were targeted in in Jos by the Hausas. The important thing I'm pointing out to you is that the Nigeria you see today is the result of multiple accidents and a child of multiple lies that have been battered. Yes, there was a post-independence detente where the North, quote and unquote, and I mean the original feudal states, kept itself to the North. But when its hold on federal power was threatened by the TV revolt of 1962 and the general disenchantment with his rule, the NPC rule in northern Nigeria, which would mean that they were not going to be able to muster enough vote to retain power in the 1960, I think that would be the 1964 election now, not too sure, or in the election that would determine power at the federal level. They found easy alliance with Akintola. That was the beginning of the crisis in the Western region, because the Western region was required to offset the loss of the Middle Belt to the North, quote and unquote. That's to the force of feudalism. The point is this: the original hegemons in Nigeria pre-1966 was Indigo. The people who first spread across Nigeria and took advantage of the colonial reach was Indigo. And that was what engendered the resentment that led to the 1966 war. Yes, it began with the January coup. It crystallized with the July counter coup. But you must understand this: nature abhors vacuums. Every country grows on the back of hegemonies. American civilization grew on the back of hegemonies. The British civilization grew on the back of an hegemony. and Nigeria was no different. The overarching hegemony in Nigeria pre-independence was Ndi Igbo hegemony. They were the ones spread across the length and breadth of Nigeria, and this is what had attracted enmity and envy as far back as 1945. The only importance of this is so that you understand that the feudal hegemony did not just step into a space that was empty. That space became emptied as a result of the issues that began on January 15, 1966, crystallized in July 1966, and led to the Civil War. The force that won the Civil War, the hegemony that emerged out of the Civil War, was the hegemony that had always been the most useful to the original owners of Nigeria, the British. This hegemony was encouraged, was entrenched. That hegemony produced the 1979 Constitution, the one that clearly went against the decision of the Constituent Assembly that had recommended a return to parliamentary rule. It forced American-style presidential system on us. You would understand where I'm going with this in a few minutes. Just come with me. That hegemony created a Nigeria that in its mind is unbreakable, but it is also a Nigeria that is not advantageous to its victims. Without the people's will, the 1979 Constitution collapsed within 4 years. But this Constitution that collapsed within 4 years became the model by which Abdusalami Abubakar produced another Constitution labeled produced Decree 24, labeled the 1999 Constitution. And the 1999 Constitution is the encapsulation of the wet dreams of those who have desired feudalism as the governing factor in Nigeria. It concentrated a lot of power in the hands of the president. It essentially makes the president, if the truth be told, the Sultan of Nigeria. He has so much powers. He appoints the judiciary, essentially. He appoints the police. He appoints everybody in the army. He is the chief appointer of everybody. He can direct the EFCC to any purpose. Malami, who thought he was invincible, has just been shown how visible he is. But this was not in pursuit of any altruism. It's simply in pursuit of naked power. It is not by accident that you are seeing governors across party lines jumping into the APC. It is not by accident that you are hearing judges singing how they are standing on his mandate. It is not by accident that you have the religious clerics falling over themselves in adulation of evil. These are not by accident. These are systemic responses programmed because the state has been designed to be feudal.